Good evening, everyone, and thank y'all for tuning in. Let me know if you can hear me. By the way, I don't know. Let's see here. I haven't had much time to get set up today. It was a very busy day, and actually, am starting later than I should have. I was supposed to start at 6 p.m. Eastern, but I got caught up with some things and lost track of time. But today I am live with Sub Zero, who has a YouTube channel. Um, by the way, if you can hear me, type yes in the comments before I go on. If not, then I will fix that. Can you hear me, Sub?
Yeah, I hear you just fine.
Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and bring him on. I know he has a hard stop here in about an hour. So let's see here. There you are. Let me try to do this way. All right. How are you today, Sub?
I'm doing pretty good. How about yourself?
Good. So this is I've been wanting to do this particular live for a while now. I first came across your content by way of Chuck Littleton. You guys have did a couple of lives together, very informative. As you know, both you and Chuck are individuals who do your own research and who are original in the way that you think and your take on certain things. So I've been wanting to get together with you, and I would have preferred for this conversation to be had between the three of us. But you know, here we are. We're just the two of us,
Okay.
and that's probably for the best since we're kind of stretched for time here. But I have a bone to pick with you. Um, Particularly as it relates to your views on reparations. Now, full disclosure, I enjoy conversations with people who have differing opinions than I do, but they can come to the table with um, preparedness to defend their ideas, to defend, how they came to the conclusions that they have come to on certain issues that won't resort to ad hominems or personal attacks, and are open to reason. I don't claim to have all the answers, um, and the older I get, the more I realize that there's more that I don't know than what I do know. Um, so again, this isn't any kind of debate or anything like that. I just am open to hearing like what you're like how you come to the conclusion that you've come to with regard to reparations and what that conclusion is, or whether you're still trying to find answers yourself. So I'll give you the floor just to explain what your take on the whole reparations thing is, and how you have come to that conclusion.
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me. Um, I didn't think we would go straight into it like that. I thought we would talk about different
I
subjects.
know we wanted. I
Or,
know
you
I wanted to
know
build it
what?
up into it. I wanted to build up into it, but I know you. I just have an hour with you, so I just wanted to cut right to
Yeah,
the
because
chase.
so this is my thing. I'm kind of like Alan Keyes or Ann Coulter in this respect. I'm a conservative. I'm a Christian. Been I was involved in ministry for years. I've done a lot of different things, but I'm gonna tell you like this: historically, growing up in Montgomery, Alabama, um, I saw or heard things in my family as it pertains to events that took place. And then when I became an adult, I found out that actually, it's one thing when your family says something, you believe it, but
Hmm.
when you can historically pinpoint the time and when things took place, it's like, wow, this is what my granddad told my grandfather. Told my dad, which was when he was a kid, they tried to burn down the banks and the businesses in Montgomery, Alabama. And they were trying to get black people out of a lot of different areas and stuff like that. So I was like, okay. So I did some research and I found out about this Red Summer thing that took place. And I was just like, wow, I didn't even know that this took place. And so just throughout my time on this planet, I've just realized that there are a lot of different events and things that took place that are not recorded, that no one wants to go and do the actual work to find out what really took place that led to this situation, led to people feeling this way. And so it's a lot of things that have just been left covered up throughout history. So at this juncture, that's why I feel the way I feel. It's not just, I don't even talk about slavery, although that can be a part of it. But I don't really just delve into slavery because they always say, oh, well, those people are dead, And so it's like, okay. And so we go throughout what took place after that. And as you go, I don't, this is the thing. In history, I think you can point out the ills or the evil of Marxist agitators that were working with Russia and the communists to try to agitate in peaceful situations. I'll be the first to say that took place. But I can also see a myriad of cases where a lot of things were done. And I think that there was a pretty much overarching idea that the African American was to be subservient. And when they weren't, there are multiple instances of people feeling like, okay, we got to get them back in their place. So they'll put out, bat signals, and people will come from all different types of counties, and thousands of people will get together. There'll be a lot of different events that took place. And I don't think this is all just communist agitation.
Yeah.
That I don't believe.
Well, I don't believe it's all communist agitation, although, truth be told, when it comes to any kind of talk of history, the reality is Democrats or leftists or whatever you want to call them historically don't bring up the communist agitation element of it because obviously it would be counterproductive as far as they're concerned. Their whole idea or their whole agenda is to usher in from their perspective, an egalitarian society, and they're wishing to usher this in by any means necessary, even if it means covertly or clandestinely or whatever, using propaganda, deceiving people, manipulating the masses to go their way. When you look at, for example, Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter is a slogan, and the engineers of the slogan called it that because they understood that most people can get behind the notion of Black Lives Mattering. Few of those people are going to actually go to the website and figure out what the organization is all about, what their agenda is. And so when you look at Black Lives Matter and the fact that over the course of 2020, they were able to rack up, I think, $9 billion in donations. Most of the people who donated to the organization didn't understand what the organization was all about, what their agenda was, but they were giving to it because the organization was able to use sensationalism and deception to communicate to people that, look, we are just trying to stop police brutality. That's all we're trying to do. But again, anybody who has a researcher's bone in their body, it takes a little more than actually going to their website, reading their about us and figuring out, okay, you're actually for full-scale communism. That's what you're for. You're for a disruption of the family. You're for everything that is, I guess, the relics of a destroyed society. That's what you want. Again, but they were able to use the deception piece. And so all that to say that when it comes to leftists, Democrats, whatever you want to call them, they're not going to mention the communist influences and a lot of agitation that was going on throughout the 20th century, because to do so would be to show their cards, so to speak. Republicans aren't going to mention it because they don't know about it. They don't know about this history. They don't know about communist influences. They don't know about the man behind the curtain, as it were. And so you have two sides of the proverbial scale or spectrum, both not mentioning the communist agitation. And so the reason why I mention it is because nobody else is. The reason why Chuck Littleton and even yourself are mentioning it is because nobody else is. What I hear you saying is that while I can acknowledge the truth that communist agitation was at play, I'm not going to sit and blame communist agitation on everything that happened throughout the 20th century. And I agree with that. I guess, and I'll go with you there. So when it comes to genuine bitterness or hatred being demonstrated by white folks, whether it be in a burning down of a business or whatever the case may be, I do think that there's more to the story, because when I do my research, what I find is the same thing that Manning Johnson found, which is that when you look across the South, what you find is that there was this kind of natural coming together of blacks and whites, and it was being done through the church, it was being done through the free market, so on and so forth. These two groups were familiarizing themselves with each other, and as such, they were learning to kind of come together and coexist. You saw the repealing of what we call Jim Crow laws and black codes that were falling off the books as a result of black and white businessmen finding that these regulations were actually unfeasible. And as such, you had the repealing of these laws. To the extent that you see an increase in agitation and communist agitation, to that same degree do you see a kind of increase in this kind of friction between black and white. And so while I can say that communist agitation isn't to blame for direct offenses of white against black every time, I will say that there was this kind of loose connection in terms of, if you open up your paper and you see, some kind of agitative thing that happens, that might harbor in you as a white person a kind of disdain for black people, because you see not the communists behind the agitation, you just see the black faces who are participants in the agitation, and that might kind of brew up some kind of agitation, or not agitation, but some kind of animosity, as it were. And it's the same reason why we see this thing called white flight, where certain white people move out of the neighborhood when they see black people moving in. Why are they moving out? Is it because they genuinely hate black folks, or is it because they see all of these things that are being done, these agitated things that are being done, and they associate foolishly that with black folks, not realizing that that was the whole plan all along as far as the communists is concerned? Because to the extent that they can cause friction, they can cause animosity, and nobody knows who to blame, where to point, and they just blame surface level things that they can see with their naked eye, namely skin color, this, that, and the third, which only covers one portion of what you were saying, but I do want to get your response to that. I know I said a lot.
Yeah, man, you said a lot, man. Okay, so this is the thing. I agree that communist agitation was a problem. I feel as though ultimately the whole Black Lives Matter piece you were talking about, I despise Black Lives Matter. I think they were pretty much a plant to destroy. And pretty much I think there's the pre-Black Lives Matter, post-Black Lives Matter, pre-Obama, post-Obama, right? Now every June I call it cultural terrorism month. It's basically you're going to get attacked from the end of May all the way to the middle of July with alphabet rainbow stuff everywhere you go. Right. So it's and a lot of this comes from the ignorance of African Americans and liberals that were protesting. This is what really empowered all that. That doesn't mean that there aren't instances where a cop would do something wrong and the cop was wrong. Now, I don't believe, I've actually done the research. I know that you're only talking about 30, 40 people per year, unarmed blacks that even get shot. Not that that's good, but that's a fraction of the amount of that we would think. People think it's thousands, and it's not. So that's one thing. On the other hand, when we talk about historically, when we talk about what took place historically, I have to push back because I feel as though I can go back historically. We can go from the construction period, and you can look at the census of 1890. And this is how you can validate that there was some things. They call it, there's a book called Sundown Towns by James Lowen. I'm sure you've read it. In that book, he talks about, he did a lot of painstaking work of going throughout towns and hamlets all throughout the country. There's one called Anna, Illinois. And while he was there, this was like early 2000s, he asked the store clerk, hey, is it true that Anna, Illinois stands for ain't no niggers allowed? She said, yeah, unfortunately it is. I mean, I know, right? Seems crazy, but he's like, yeah. And if you go and look at, he would go into these city halls and he would go and see, like, okay, census of 1890, Black people after slavery were scattered all across the United States. This was during Reconstruction. Reconstruction was about 15 years. So you're talking about 1880 to 1890, round up in that period. Black people scattered all over the country. They were in Wyoming, they were in Montana, they were in all these different counties, right? So for this is after slavery. Because my thing with it is, I'll say this. I say this all the time. If black people had been left alone after slavery, we wouldn't know what the words white supremacy mean.
Mm.
Because if you leave us alone after slavery, we were all skilled labor, and we all had a trade. So if you'd have just left us alone and we had been allowed to partake in the American dream, some were, but if I'm talking about fully partake, not being held back. And what I
Well, let me
mean
ask
by
you a
held back,
question. Let me ask you a question, and I don't want to hold your train of thought because I want to follow where you're going. When you say if we would have been left alone, who was messing with us exactly?
okay, so for example, let's look at the Freedmen's Bank. The Freedmen's
Mm-hmm.
Bank is a bank that they handed off to African Americans. In this was at first it was the 40 acres and a mule. Let's go back to there. 40 acres and a mule. The Republicans stated that hey, these people, you can't just let them free like that. Let's give them something to get them started because they're not going to be able to protect themselves, build wealth. And of course, so a few people in South Carolina actually did get their land, and I'll revisit that later. But of that, certain people got their land. They were able to. Then they stopped it. They pulled the Union Army out of Atlanta, and at that point, they said, "Okay, well, look, we're gonna give them this bank called the Freedmen's Bank." They used Lincoln and images of different people. I don't know if Frederick Douglass was used, but they basically marketed this to African American slaves, former slaves, to basically put your money here. This is a great place for you to grow wealth. And under the sneak of night, they went and changed it. Where at first, when they first created it, they said, "Hey, you can put your money here. It's going to grow. We're not going to make risky investments. We don't make high risk investments. We're not going to make loans." Well, Congress changed that, right? And they
Mm-hmm.
changed it to where now they can make risky loans. They can make high risk investments. And when they did that, what that allowed them to do was start making these, good old boy loans to their friends. And a lot of this money, now they say it had gotten upwards of $100 million back in 1880, 1875. So these people, these African Americans, and you can see this, and a lot of times when you watch Henry Louis Gates, when they do the history thing, you'll see the black people will be up there and like, yeah, your great 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 grandfather paid $4,000. He's like, okay, how did he get $4,000? He actually worked and saved $4,000, and I'm talking about he's working at like $1.50 a day. That's amazing. So they would do that type of stuff. But so basically with the Freedmen's Bank, it wound up getting ran out. You know the story. They stole, basically loaned out the money, stole a lot of the money. Frederick Douglass came in, tried to save it, he couldn't. So this is yet another after slavery, yet again, 1885, 1890, you back falling on your face again. It done took all this money from, okay, we're gonna start over. But by 1890, a large amount of people started to resent African Americans because what happened? We moved with this redneck culture that I agree with. We moved to these highly populated areas. And when we got in these highly populated areas, a lot of individuals felt like, okay, I don't like your culture. Or they'll make assumptions. Just like you said, when people see, because I'm gonna be honest with you. I live in an area, it's probably 75% white. If I see a bunch of black people moving out here,
Oh, so you sold out.
hey, if they playing music,
You
if I see a
divested.
music, they walking in the grass. Look here, man, I'm gone, right? I'm leaving. And
You are
it
kind of
doesn't
high
mean
yellow though.
they're gonna rob me. Doesn't but if you parking on the grass, if you barbecuing on the front porch, you bumping all these loud music speakers. I don't want that. I already know what comes because I'm from the hood. So I get it. I get why people feel that way. But I'm just saying, I think that's what happened. I think in that time frame, the southern slaves moved up in Montana. There was like, I think 11 counties in Montana where it was like over 1,000 blacks. Blacks were all over Montana at one time
Right.
in 1890. Then all of a sudden it went way down to like, about like 1900, 1910 was like 5 in this county, 3. So like, how you go from 1,500 to 5 to 3? right? And somebody, I'm talking about, it stayed like that well up until the 1980s in certain counties. And so for me, I just think that right there is dangerous because, like, for example, you have a business. I don't know if you have kids, but I'm assuming you
Yeah,
do.
I got 4 kids.
Okay, I know if I say, "Hey, man, let's force you to move to the hood, to the ghetto, and not give you, and your kids have to go to school with Junebug and all of them, and your kid. I
Cookie and
mean,
Ray
you
Ray.
as a father, you're gonna do the best you can, but to
Right.
say that there won't be any residue from that, there will be. You'll be affected by that. I think you have to take that into account and say that was something that was facilitated at a state, federal, and local level by the government and by businesses, private entities,
Mm-hmm.
and often in many cases, we just saw a case, what, I think in the early 2000s about against the USDA about land for black farmers, where there was stuff done through the federal government doing stuff to, and you can see, you talk to a lot of black farmers, they'll say, "Hey, man, they give these loans to these people, but it's this white." Yes, one guy in Mississippi I watched, he was
But I
like,
don't, I
"I
don't, I
can't
don't
get
get
my."
caught up in that though. And not to cut you off, but I don't get caught
Okay.
up in that. And here's why. Because whether we're talking about the Freedmen's Bureau, the Freedmen's Bank, federal loans, what the government gave these people, what the government gave those people, like I'm against the very notion, and I think you can share in this opinion, that the government should be involved in dishing out loans or starting banks or any of that stuff to begin with, because it's only going to lead to grievances. Because the thing is, anytime the government gets involved in something, they're going to do something for one group at the expense of another. The heck? I got this light shining on me, so I got stuff flying around here. But the like, so what the research that I personally have done, what I found, and this is also true of my own family, is that after slavery, there were private loans given out to a lot of the newly freed slaves. Some of those loans came from former slave masters themselves. In fact, my paternal side of the family, whenever they were freed from slavery, they were given 80 acres of land from their former slave masters. And that land is still in our family's name to this very day. And this isn't this kind of one-off thing. There were a lot of this going on, especially in Arkansas, where my dad's side of the family is from. And so the fact of the matter is the government wasn't the only means by which people were able to get some kind of means by which to mobilize upward. And the fact is, when you look at the government's involvement and the dishing out of loans, not only for black folks, but for other groups as well, there was some kind of hook in there that in the long run ended up working to the detriment of the people who were supposed to have gotten that loan or that grant or whatever the case may be. And so when it comes to reparation, the point being to repair a damage. If we go into a grievance that people have, be they black, white, Hispanic, Asian, whatever the case may be, all of us are owed some kind of reparations by that logic. The question for me, and this kind of goes back to my philosophy, which is informed by my faith, because I am a Christian. If we are constantly trying to look at the sins of the past and trying to rectify those sins through some kind of monetary means or tax breaks or whatever the case may be, we are going to find ourselves perpetually in a state of people airing their grievances, because when one group sees it and another group sees it, the government, or our relationship with the government, our government as a people, as American people, will perpetually be, you need to make right this thing that you did to my ancestors long ago. And everybody will have, would be right in making such a point. At what point do we say, okay, what happened is in the past is done. Let's now utilize the opportunities that we have in the private sector to make the most of our lives. Like, why do we continue to dwell on what happened in the past. History is important, and you're from Montgomery, Alabama. I would venture to say that your family has been in Alabama for generations. Am I correct in that assumption?
Yes.
Like you're just okay. You know as well as I do that Alabama was a huge stomping ground for communist activity throughout the 20th century, and there was a lot of agitated things that were going on. I would argue that gave rise to a lot of friction. I'm sure you're familiar with this book by Harold Cruz, "The Crisis of the Negro Intellectual."
No, I'm not.
So, in this book, he talks about communist agitation, but he also talks about the agitation that was done at the behest of other groups that weren't even communists, groups that were socialists, like the NAACP. How Roy Wilkins himself, with Thurgood Marshall, even disguised themselves as sharecroppers to go down into the South and organize unions to protest some white landlords and things of this nature. They knew full well what they were doing. Go
I
ahead.
want to ask you. So I believe that the reason that was able to take root so strongly in the black community to where now the black fist is synonymous with being black. I believe it was because of the collective of things that actually were done.
Mm,
So to like, for example, I talked about this in my video. I said, let's look at black horse jockeys.
right.
Let's look at black hockey players. Let's look at black baseball players. Where everybody thinks Jackie Robinson was first. Black people were playing initially, and right around 1890, around that same time frame that I keep talking, there was a pulling back in a lot of areas, namely these three different sports. Now, what are the chances that in three different sports, all the black players that were dominating these areas, winning all these different events, they just stop, and all of a sudden everybody's white? Like, what are the mathematical chances of that happening? In particular, when at that time, it wasn't like the economy was so vast where you had so many different options. It was either
Mm-hmm.
sharecropper, give or take a couple of things, but someone riding a horse, someone playing baseball, that's different. And what I'm saying is the reason that pullback was there, that wasn't just in sports, that was also in business.
Mm-hmm.
Great example, the People's Grocery of Memphis. Gentlemen, this guy was a friend of Ida B. Wells. She was living there, and this guy was doing great business. Him and a couple of brothers had started the People's Grocery. It was flourishing. All of a sudden, this white guy who's his competition from across town showed up with guns. They had a shootout. The brothers defended their business like they should have. They get locked up, go to jail. You know where this story's going. They wind
Right.
up pulling them out. A crowd forms. They pull him out. They drag him, hang him, shoot him, kill him, cut his. They had one guy they cut his penis off and made him eat his own pieces of it. The point I'm trying to make is all this stuff that was done was under the Overton window at the time that you saw these players in these sports being pulled out. The Overton window at that time was, let's get them out of this. And it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
just in sports. You just saw it in those three sports. And I don't think
Right.
that just happened. People, you know what? They're not interested. No, they wanted to, they couldn't. They weren't allowed to. And so that was not just in that, it was also in other areas. Like I talked about, when you see instances historically, Ida B. Wells stated, most of these hangings and stuff is of businessmen. The
Mm-hmm.
Oak massacre, Okasee, or however you pronounce it. Black guy, multimillionaire, doing well. Crowd shows up, drag him, hang him, kill him. This is. I can keep going. Springfield, Massachusetts, 19. I think it's not Massachusetts. I think it's Springfield, Illinois, 1908. Same scenario. It's so many different instances, and so what I'm saying is, coupled with slavery, coupled with all the other stuff you did, where in anyone that came to America, it was pretty much understood I have to distance myself from black because black was in writing specified everywhere to be rejected. And so I think that coupled with all this other stuff builds us a much stronger case than somebody that just jumped the fence last week and now he talking about he oppressed and he came here illegally. I don't think we owe him anything. And that's the same case Ann Coulter makes. In that
Yeah.
she's basically, and I agree with her, that there's only one group that you can say we've actually wronged historically in this country. Are there instances of one-offs of individuals where you can have a grievance as a Hispanic or an Asian? Yes. But for the most part, they've been left alone. Great example, Indians, Native Americans, given the ability to have their own. But in the Treaty of 1866, they were supposed to, part of that treaty was that they were supposed to split this money, like basically with former slaves. They didn't give them a dime. So it's
But
a
with
lot of different times where just black people got the short end of the stick more so than any other group. And I'm
I
thinking
can
that
I can
strongly to be defended versus
mhm.
some LGBT guy. Because first of all, it was like y'all was a 0.5% 50 years ago. Nobody was
Right.
gay back then. Let's stop it. And if
Now
you
it's trending.
weren't committing suicide like you claim you would be today. So
Right. I agree with a lot of what you're saying. Although I don't know. I take. I mean, when you start quoting Ida B. Wells and others, I have to kind of take that with a grain of salt because she had a um, she was pretty favorable of socialist ideology, and so it just makes me. And the thing is, like when you look at this time of American history, you find that individuals like, Mabel Dodge Lujan, W.E.B. Du Bois, a lot of your muckraker journalists and so on, they were influenced by socialist ideology to push a narrative that would make that would so rise, I guess, a level of discontent among the masses that they would
hold on,
push for.
hold on 1 second. So when you say that,
Hmm.
I can cite newspaper articles where the media wasn't feeling sorry for. It was like this needs to be stopped. They would advertise, like if for example somebody supposedly did something, they put them in the guy gets locked up. The next day's paper, there'd be articles. They'd have this all over, and they'd be advertising in other counties. This guy raped a white woman. Sorry for saying rape,
Hmm.
whatever. This guy essayed a white woman, right? And then the next thing you know, the article wasn't written from a place like by some communist agitator. It'd really probably be some liberal Democrat, or not liberal, but some racist Democrat or somebody from that time frame that felt as though it was best to try and say, look, I want to get rid of this person. We need to get rid of these people. These people, like I can show you articles of people saying,
No, 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 no. You're
we need
right.
to,
You're
these
right. But
people need to know their
that's
place.
but what I'm explaining is this is how the friction works. The person who writes the article, nabbed Negro for raping white girl or whatever the case may be, they are like the whole point of the communist agitation is to so stoke the kind of irrational reactionaryism that you're talking about in the articles. They know full well, the communists, the socialists, whatever the case may be, they know full well the kind of friction that the agitation would cause. And so they're banking on the irrational, genuine white supremacists to react in that way. Because to the extent that you react in that way, that causes more friction. That causes lynchings, that causes burnings, that causes this, that causes that. This is exactly what they want to cause. Because the communists, by virtue of their political philosophy, their economic philosophy, they wish that people would join together, says Manning Johnson, not on the basis of free market, not on the basis of the church, not on the basis of people joining together, but rather to come together on the basis of revolution. This is the very reason why there's incentive for the communists to break up the black business, because when they look at black, they see a means by which to overthrow the system. And so to the extent that blacks begin to assimilate with the American idea and to begin to mobilize upward through capitalist means, as a communist sitting back in the cut, you don't like this. Because to the extent that more blacks start businesses and are doing well, they have no use for the revolutionary. They have no use for the NAACP. They have no use for these agitative organizations. But if you can stoke the racists, get them to come into town and burn everything down. The black person is left desolate, deprived, empty handed, and he's going to be more
Okay. Okay.
inclined to revolt or to join the ranks of the
Okay. I agree.
revolutionaries.
I agree with what you just said. I think that's masterfully put. Whenever they did it, it was state, federal, and locally sanctioned, though. Like police officers would stand by. I think it was Vienna, Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
They showed up and they were killing a black guy tried to move in, and the police officers stopped him. And then this was wow. This is just something that took place. And basically, long story short, they stood by and watched a crowd of people show up, go in there, took all his furniture. He wasn't there. They
Mm-hmm.
got his furniture, burned all his stuff. Next day they showed up. They went to black businesses, ran all the black people out the county. So, and what I'm saying is, whenever this would happen, let's say there were communist agitators, right? If there were communist agitators, it's one thing. We can talk about them because I'm all for dragging them out. Herbert Marcuse, all the different the Frankfurt School. I'm all for. I drag them down to every video. I've lost channels talking about the Frankfurt School, but at the
Right.
same time, I feel as though this would not have been as successful as it was if there wasn't a lot of the political and social climate at the time. The Overton window wasn't where it was, and it was
Right.
where it was. I feel as though sanctioned through government, and when you sanction something through government to be able to make us more susceptible to these evil, entry, because I agree, Marxism is evil. I think these people came and they did a lot of evil things. I'm not a Democrat, but at the
Mm-hmm.
end of the day, I think a lot of these people came in and did a lot because we were susceptible. For a good example, Teach 'em Chuck talked about the black woman being susceptible to feminism
Feminism. Yeah.
because of the, you know, basically misogyny of the Black Panthers and how they would beat the women, rape them. They would do a lot. I'm sorry, SA to women, right? They would do a lot of things, and
Yeah.
what would happen is these women wound up saying, "Hey, screw this! I'm going over here. I'm finna get with Gloria Steinem. We about to do our thing." Bell hooks. Next thing you know, that all stemmed out of them
Yeah.
wanting to be
Nikki
Marxists,
Giovanni.
but they made the environment so toxic that they left out, and that's what bred that. And so,
Right.
but you have to blame. I blame the Black Panthers for having a toxic environment because if you're a Marxist, you're probably gonna have a toxic environment, right?
Right.
You're gonna be
Yeah.
misogynistic because it's evil at its core. And so I'm
Right.
saying because I can look at that and say it's their fault because they did this, and me and Chuck agreed on this. But I can also look at the government and say you
Mm-hmm.
facilitated this. Fannie Mae and Freddie saying, "Hey, we're not gonna give loans at first." They were talking about they discriminated, and when they did that, that created suburbs that we couldn't get into. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
listen. I'm not a guy. First of all, let me talk about reparations for a second. I don't think reparations. If you say reparations, there are a lot of different things you can do that would. Because in my personal opinion, I don't think we should be sending money to a lot of these countries. I don't. There's a lot of things, and if we stop
Agreed.
that, I probably wouldn't even be. I'd be like, okay. Well, since they're not giving money away, but if they're gonna give some money away, I think there's a case that if you say, okay, not writing a check, because and look, I don't have a problem with a check, but let's say you don't. It doesn't have to be. It could be for those African Americans that are productive, that are married. That you got to be married 5 years, or basically.
Okay.
Go ahead.
No, no, no. Go ahead. Finish your point. I'm sorry.
No, what the point I'm trying to make is it doesn't have to be something that is even financial. It could be something like I don't know. I have to think about it. But it's a lot of. In fact,
Yeah.
even when I talked about deficit neutral, there's a guy by the name of Black Patriarch has a YouTube channel. He broke down how you can do it deficit neutral, and he talked about
Mm-hmm.
Obamacare and how Obama wanted this, but he couldn't get it, so he got this. Black people, you want reparations. The climate won't. You won't get it. Let's remove the word reparations. But when you talk about a deficit neutral thing, he talked about taking like 2 or 3% of a person's gross, giving businesses a benefit from that, and it would be a small amount because black people don't earn that much. And after about 10 years, you start making disbursements with these cards to be able to go have dollars circulate. It's a lot. It's a couple of things people have come out that would be deficit neutral. So if there's not anybody's money going into it, then if you were to produce something like that, that would be different. So it's ways to keep people happy without necessarily bending and compromising your principles. It's okay. I don't believe in big government. Well, I don't think we should be sending $60 billion to Israel, but we do. And now we're talking about sending out soldiers and troops over there to die. So I don't agree with that.
And I don't agree with that either. And you and I are on the same page as that. I don't think we should be sending all this money we don't have to foreign entities. I'm in agreement with you on that. I guess where I disagree with you is this notion that since we are at it, since we are in the business of giving out money, why not then give money to black folks? That's where I disagree, because I think that such a mindset incentivizes even more government expansion. And that's, with all due respect, Sub, that's where I think you are contradicting yourself, because on the one hand, you claim to be for small government, but on the other hand, with that point of, since we're in the business of giving out money, like you are then kind of giving the government permission to expand itself all the more in the way of giving out money. And then not only that, to say that, okay, maybe not give all black folks money, maybe the entrepreneur, the business owner, this, that, and the third. Well, the business owner and entrepreneur is going to be successful regardless of what the government does, because these are people who are already driven. They already have ambition. They're already, they have the kind of self-respect and the kind of ambition to go out there and get it. So to say, okay, let's infuse cash into them by way of the government, that, in my opinion, does more harm than it does good, because as a business owner yourself, better than anyone that there's something there's a character building kind of component to going out there and getting it yourself.
Okay,
and so
I agree with
and not only that, the last point I'll make is when you look at the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and you look at the civil rights efforts at the behest of MLK and his compatriots, who among black folks benefited the most from their efforts?
Elites.
Exactly. And so what makes what you're saying any different than what they were doing during the civil rights movement?
Great question. So first off, I don't like the word reparations, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I were president, this is just something that you can do. We talk about bureaucracies all the time. Don't change. There's money that the SBA gets. That money, all you have to do, and this is something I don't understand why you don't do this. Well, I'm gonna say I don't understand. I understand why. But all you got to do, in my mind, is just rewrite certain, you say, hey, okay, so we're going to create this program in the SBA, and it's going to be part of the SBA budget. A lot of these decisions aren't made through voting on laws in Congress. They create bureaucracies, and the bureaucracies make decisions. That's first. Secondly, it doesn't even have to be part of a deficit. Like, it doesn't have to be, the money doesn't have to necessarily come in a place of, taking or expanding government. If you say, okay, if it can be done without expanding government, where we spend our own money, for example, someone opts in to a program where they're spending their own, a certain small percentage is taken out, 1% to 2%, and they're able to do something. That could be that. It could be stuff. It's ways to do stuff. I don't think it's always just, hey man, let's go ahead and print out another $1 trillion and give it. But what I'm saying is, I don't believe in Ukraine. I don't believe in Israel. I don't believe in, we sending $60 billion. Israel has I think, one of the most sophisticated militaries on the face of the earth. And we talking about helping them. For what? Right?
With our drag queen military.
Yeah, you got Nikki Haley's out here, they talking about if she gets in, she's going to basically push us out into more wars. And it's like, it's dizzy. I'm getting dizzy as I'm looking at it. And it's like every other day there's a new budget, something else.
Right.
Illegal immigrants across the border. Okay, let's give each one $500,000, because wait a minute, you gonna give them $500,000? And you got all these people out here that really I think have more of a substantial case. They've been here for hundreds of years, and they have all these things that we can actually point to where you did them wrong. If you just talking about being held in a cage, I mean,
Yeah.
that right there, I'm
But it
like,
seems.
okay, the fact that he would say that, and I disagreed with it all, but he said it. So
Yeah.
it's in the government. It's not a big deal in the government for us to give money to people for stuff that happened. I like, for example, this mythical event that supposedly took place called the Holocaust, right?
Hmm.
I don't think it happened, but
Yeah.
that's
You
just me.
you but again, I think where we disagree is that my solution is to cut off the money that we're sending to foreign entities. Cut it off. When it comes to, because I hear people all the time saying, we're giving all this money to Ukraine when we got people starving. Okay, well, the people are going to starve because they don't have enough work ethic and they don't have any kind of get up and go about them to utilize the opportunities that are made available for them in the private sector that most of us are willing to utilize to advance our station in life, to uplift ourselves and to our families. Those opportunities exist
Americans aren't
in
starving.
this
We're not
country.
starving.
We're not starving,
We're
we're
not
not
starving. I
struggling.
mean, we got
And so
homeless
if you're and
people.
so people are
Yeah.
starving, it's not because the government's not giving them money, it's because of the decisions that they're making. We have to be man enough to admit that. And so for me, I say cut the money off that we're sending overseas. um, we need to repeal what's it called, the Federal Insurance Contributions Act, FICA. We need to repeal that, so we're not taking money out of people's paycheck. Because if you're going to work, it's you who's doing that work. It's you who's getting up out of bed early, going and breaking the earth to make a living so you can bring back money home to pay for groceries and rent and car insurance and this, that, and the third. We don't need to be taking portions of your money. The government gets first dibs on your paycheck. That's absurd to me. There shouldn't be any kind of income tax. That to me is treason. We shouldn't be income or taxing people's income. Sales tax is a different story. Income tax is absolutely absurd. The fact is, we should be pushing more for a meritocracy, to where you make your bed and that's the bed that you sleep in. If you fell, then that's on you. I'm sorry, that's on you. If you need a hand up, then rely upon some kind of private organization, some kind of nonprofit, a church or whatever, your community of, whether it be family or whatever it is that you're into, to help you get your leg up. But this notion that the government should be involved and this kind of equating of the society and this kind of social safety net, completely absurd. We don't need it. So
Okay.
where
Okay.
I'm
I agree.
arguing,
I agree.
where,
I
where
agree.
I'm
And while we're
arguing
at it,
that, yeah,
I'm
while
sorry.
I'm arguing that we don't need to divert the money to the people, because to do so, we're setting up the precedents for socialism. It seems that you are arguing that we should cut the money off from going to foreign entities and then divert that money instead to the people who need it most.
No,
Am I
let me say this.
misunderstanding you?
Let me say this. If it were up to me, the only way you would know that the government exists, I think the basic fundamental function, the first function of government, is to protect borders.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yep.
You're supposed to, the way our system should function, you shouldn't even know the government exists. It should be
Right.
so small and minute,
Right.
right? That being said, since we want to get rid of safety net programs, why not abolish the Fed? Why not get rid of the NEA? Right? Why not get rid of the post office? Let's get rid of. I mean, all of these are things that I would love. I would love to see. And as far as people being homeless on the streets, I think there's only two types of people that are homeless: mentally ill and drug addicts. Those are the only two I've ever seen. People that are homeless, usually for a brief period of time, they have a hard time, then they back. You might have those people that are transitioning, so I guess that's three. But for the most part, I don't see people that are upstanding people that got all their right mind and they're not on drugs and they're homeless for 5 years. I don't. That's hard to believe. I mean, I'm not. I'm sure there's somewhere where there may be some extreme case where that took place, but I remember Ronald Reagan made a lot of people upset in the 80s because he said the same thing. He's like, man, look, they just hadn't been able to find the social programs. And so, look, I'm not a socialist, man. And I see, I know I'm in, I guess
Yeah, I know you're
the
not.
reason,
I know you're not.
I guess the reason we came here was to talk about this subject. But at the same time, I agree. If we want to get rid of government all in all, I'm for it. I'm
Well,
all
I'm not
for the
a
what are they constitutional Congress. Let's get rid of term limits. I mean, let's
right.
add term limits. There's a
Right.
lot of things you could do that I would love to see, but
Yeah.
at the end of the day, we don't have those. And so I think what I was saying was you can divert certain things or you can make it deficit neutral. I think it has to
Mm-hmm.
be deficit neutral because you don't have the political capital as black people to get
Mm-hmm.
anything through Congress or the Senate that isn't deficit neutral. But if it's
Mm-hmm.
something you're gonna have to pay for it yourself, which means you're gonna have to help yourself.
I see where you're
And
coming from. Yeah,
that's me. So at the end
I
of the
see where you're
day,
coming from.
first of all, I'm gonna say this too. Black people, you're never gonna get reparations. So I want to go ahead and put that out there. It's never gonna happen. It's just we just talking. This is purely conjecture. This is for entertainment purposes only.
Right.
Not 1 second do I don't believe in transformative government like Tone Talks and Yvette Carnell.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that it was just a great thought experiment, just something to wrestle your
Yeah.
brain. But ultimately, do I think we're going to get it? No. If I were able to, would I do it? I believe I would. I would do it, and I think I
Yeah.
would do it in such a way where I don't think you would be upset. I don't
I
think there's a
you.
way you can do this where
Mhm.
you can't satisfy everybody. There's only one way to do it, and it has to be deficit neutral.
What you're saying makes sense. I guess where I'm coming from is I try to be, and I'm not saying you're not, but I'm just saying where I'm coming from. I try to be principled in my thinking in terms of how, like, what our relationship as citizens are or is supposed to be with our government. And I feel like at this point it's a runaway train. And I see people on the right all the time saying, well, the left does this, so we have to use it in this way. And what they're saying may sound good, at the surface, but then you begin to think about it, and you realize that what you're arguing for, although it's kind of masked with this kind of veneer of being conservative or on the right or whatever the case may be, at the end of the day, it's setting up the precedents for the usefulness of government. And at this point, the government, once again, and the expansion of their power is a runaway train. And so what I like to think about are ways to kind of ring that in, ways to kind of crack down on the corruption, of abating the bureaucracy, of again, bringing back some of those powers and investing those into we the people. I do think that, to be fair to you, because I in a word, am claiming that your I guess desire for reparations, although that's not completely fair to you, is a kind of pie in the sky thing. I think what I'm arguing is pie in the sky as well, if I'm being fair, because what I'm arguing for depends on people who actually care about the sanctity of our Constitution, people who actually care about the sanctity of the sovereignty of the people and of the family and of the municipality over the expansion of the federal government. And so what I'm
I think
arguing
I got it.
for is a kind of lofty thing because it relies on a populace or a society of people who actually care enough to make sure that their government is not running amok. And I
Let me
don't
put it
think we're
like this.
there.
I agree with you. Let me say this. I think as a good trade off, if you get rid of the not affirmative action, if you get rid of what is it, income tax, if you remove income tax, if you remove government forcing people to go to certain schools, if you, it's a lot of things you could do that I would then say, hey, then it would be purely a meritocracy. I have no problem with that. Now I know culturally black people would lose out often because we don't work as hard. We don't. These are facts, right? So I'm not under any delusions about black people. It's just racism, white super. No, you lazy, right?
Right.
I do a million. You listen to my content, so you know I do a lot of
Right.
videos going in on that subject.
You don't pull your punches. That's for sure.
But what I'll say is this: if you were president and you were to do the things you just said, I wouldn't care about nobody should even be talking about reparations, because then at that point and even to this, let me say this too. At that point, you would be able to you get rid of income tax, you probably have school choice in a way you never had it. You'd have, first of all, your parents, if you get rid of NEA, I would probably get rid of public schools altogether. Like, you have to pay for education. Then your parents gonna put a belt to your behind, things like that.
Right.
Those are the types of things I think that you can go back to. And if you were to do that, it would be a cultural shift into where I feel as though can come to common ground and agree that a meritocracy would be a great. I would love a meritocracy. That being said, I love America. I love America. I love living in a capitalistic system. I was about to do a video. My internet's very weak, as you can probably tell, and I just got a new modem today, so I'm gonna get it fixed. But they got to come install it. But
right.
The point I'm trying to make is, I love living in America. I think we're the most blessed Black people that have ever walked the face of the earth. And if you don't take advantage
more than the Moors,
that's your fault.
You think we're more blessed than the
look,
Moors?
you can bring up what's that guy name? Mansa Musa, right? Mm-hmm. We can talk about Mansa Musa, but every amenity that those people had, a guy in the ghetto has that plus more. It's probably the Black person in the ghetto today is living at a better quality of life probably than Mansa Musa had. Outside of him, of course, he had harems and all that stuff, but he had air conditioning, running water, heat, internet, transportation. Everything you ever wanted is at your fingertips.
That's a very good point. And
a wealth of knowledge.
Yeah.
So at this point, I'm a capitalist.
Mm-hmm. That's a very
I'm
good
a capitalist.
point.
I believe in capitalism. I believe that I believe in the American way and things like that.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No. I think that there's some kind of delay. So I think it seems like we're trying to cut each other off, but I thought you were at a stopping point. Go ahead.
No, that was it. I was just pointing out some things that I feel like if we were to shift to a more, I guess I'll call it libertarian way of government, I don't think you need reparations. I don't think there would be a case for it. I don't think, because then you can purely look at a Black person and say there is literally nothing stopping you, which there isn't now, but in their minds, of course, and that's a big, that's a lot of work that needs to be done. But I think when you talk about the average citizen, like, for example, you're a businessman, employee payroll taxes, it's ridiculous. You're getting taxed on the gas. You're getting taxed on.
Yeah. I have to shut down my company. We're getting
taxed so much.
Yeah. I have to shut down my company.
That's what I'm saying. They're taxing us
and basically revamp it.
Go ahead.
Revamp it to where I don't have any W-2 employees. Now I just have 1099 subcontractors. It's much easier in terms of taxes, and I find too that it's actually it actually yields a higher quality of work, because there's a difference in the mindset between the guy who works 9 to 5 and just know, regardless of whether he does a good job or a bad job, he's going to get paid at the end of the week. He's going to get his paycheck on Friday. It doesn't matter. Again, what he puts in, how much he brings in, and then me as a business owner, I have to come up with ways to incentivize good work, whether it means writing you up if you are late or this, that, and the third. And you have to spend so much time in the kind of morale of the workplace so as to motivate your guys, especially in this current age where people, men in particular, aren't bred anymore to be honorable in the kind of work that they put out. Whereas when you are dealing with subs, you're dealing with guys who are 1099. The fact is, in construction, they don't get paid till the job is done or until they're able to invoice. And that invoice prompts a kind of quality control. I have to go in and ensure that the quality of work was done to a satisfactory standard, and then I will, okay the authorization of the payment. And so it just yields a greater quality of work when I do it that way. Whenever I'm doing the whole W-2 thing, the government's involved, taxes, it's just nonsensical.
I
You
mean,
still have to pay taxes, but
if I were to, if for example, if just to kind of make a case for that, like when we talk about the reparations argument, which is, like I said, is a pipe dream. But if you look at it from the aspect of, okay, if you have a business, no payroll taxes.
mm-hmm,
But that's what you just said. And that's how government should function anyway.
mm-hmm,
Where you start a bit, okay, you work a job, somebody's paying you 70,000. You keep $70,000. You don't come home, they pay you 70, you coming home with 50. You are like, what happened? Before you even, that's before 401k, before you invent anything. So I'm all for that. If that word should be implemented, I would love to see it. But the only way I see that happening is America being fractured into pieces, and small municipalities form with certain states, and they do their own thing. Other than that, I
yeah,
just don't see it being feasible. And if we only have a certain window of time and opportunity for that to happen, because people are leaving New York, they're leaving California, they're moving to Texas, they're moving to Georgia, they're moving to Florida, and they're going to destroy it because they're termites. And they're just going to go in there and rot it out like rotten wood. And next thing you know, Alabama, Mississippi, they're all going to be the same as New York and California. And once the state turns blue, that's it. It's over. So
yeah. I know we're pressed for time, but I did want to cover something briefly with you before I let you go. Are you a Republican?
no,
Okay.
I'm a conservative.
Um, when did you, like, were you ever a Republican, and when did you decide that you're not one anymore?
I was a Republican. 9/11 happened. All these different events, and I saw 9/11 through the eyes of go get bin Laden. I believed the official story. Then I saw loose change. Then I doubted. I said, man, they lying, And then I saw Dick Cheney and George Bush, and I said, man, they really were warmongers. They wanted to send us to war. These different things. I was arguing for that against John Kerry and all of them. And it just, I don't know. I guess I just kind of, from that point on, I didn't want to vote for John McCain. And when I saw Barack Obama, I was like, okay, he came in after that first term. I voted for Romney, right? I was like, I hope Romney wins. And the way he ran, he just, like, for example, there were counties in California, in Ohio, where there were like ridiculously high levels of votes that were turned in. He didn't even try to fight. He didn't, I was like, man, I'm through with the Republican. After Mitt Romney, I was through because I knew Mitt Romney was the type of guy that was an establishment guy. And I started noticing that the establishment is making sure that their job is to slow down the decay. That's what this that we're going to decay. We're going down the left lane. We're going down the toilet morally and all that. But we're going to make slow compromises with the Republicans. And I'm not for that. I'm like, no, we're getting away from true principles of what it really means to be a conservative.
I don't think that their job is to slow down the decay. I think it's rather to tame those of us who are aware that it is a runaway train at this point. From it's to tame us or to dissuade us from, in a sense, rising up. Although I hate to use that word, but it's to dissuade us from rising up under the notion that we have people in Congress who are slowing down or who are trying to stop the decay. Because at the end of the day, we have people there fighting for us, and so they pander, they placate, they do all the things to make us think that they're on our side. But the reality is, it is one big uniparty.
Well,
One of the things
I,
that
I saw. I live in Georgia, right?
mm-hmm,
So in the 2020 election, the day after the election, I mean, I'm not lying, I'm not exaggerating. The day after the election, someone came and knocked on the door, this white guy, and said, I'm with Stacey Abrams. I'm here to collect your mail-in ballot. This was the day after the election. They cheated, man. Real simple. I don't think they won probably a myriad of states. And so
I agree. I
when I
agree.
saw the Republicans, when I saw the Republican governor, I saw the Republican Secretary of State. He said they were going to recount the votes. They had the people recount the votes, and it was like 50 feet away where they can watch them count. I'm like, how are you going to be able to see if it's a bad ballot from 50 feet away? When I saw that, I said the Republican establishment is trying to stop the uprise of the MAGA movement. They don't want to see people, galvanized behind somebody who's not part of them. If it
Yeah.
had been a Mitt Romney type guy, he would have won and it wouldn't have been a problem. But I think Nikki Haley, certain people they'll let in, but certain people they won't. I like
Yeah.
outsiders. I don't like people that are part of that.
Yeah. I mean, they definitely cheated in Georgia, and now they're handing out indictments like candy, um, so as to send a signal to anyone else who would dare try to bring accusations against voter fraud.
Man, I don't see how you can't say it's voter fraud, man. The day of the election, I remember people putting up cardboard on the windows. Like that whole precinct should be disqualified.
Right.
And then in Pennsylvania, the Supreme Court Justice Alito, or whatever his name was, told them to split the votes up. They completely ignored this. I'm like, he should have disqualified all that. But they
Yeah.
let it. It's like no one's there to really fight for the little guy. So I'm looking at countries to move to because I don't really think America's going to make it. That's just me.
Yeah. One of the things I notice about a lot of your Republican politicians is that during election season, they go on the campaign trail and they talk a big game about family values, and I feel that this is a distraction mechanism, to make you think that they're on your side. Family values, family values, family values. But if you think about it, okay, I believe in family values, so I guess we agree on that point. But I actually don't need you for family values. I'm doing fine with the whole family values thing by myself. As a man who works, who goes to church, who takes care of my children, this, that, and the third, I'm pretty good on the whole family values front. In fact, all the men I know who are family values people are going to do family values in spite of who is in office politically. So I don't actually need you in office for family values. I need you in office to help stop this kind of runaway train that is government. Are you familiar with the what do they call this thing? It's this new act that Ted Cruz is pushing. The AM radio in every vehicle act. Have you heard of this? So
No.
there's this act, this policy that Ted Cruz linked up with a liberal senator on, and it's called the AM Radio in Every Vehicle Act. And what they're doing is there's a lot of car manufacturers who are producing these electric vehicles, but they're saying that they're not going to have AM radio in the vehicles because it costs too much money to include it, this, that, and the third. And so they're saying that we're not going to put AM radio in the vehicles. Well, Ted Cruz linked up with a liberal senator, and they are saying, okay, well, we're going to use the government to force you to put AM radio in your vehicles. Now, as a small business owner myself, I don't like that. And, somebody might argue, well, these are big, car manufacturer companies. These are, big time companies. It's not the same as your small business. Well, the fact is, as a business owner, I don't want to give the government the kind of precedence to think that it can just tell companies, regardless of if they're big or small, how to run their companies. You know what I mean? As a owner of a plumbing company, I don't want the government to come in and say, this is the kind of services that you have to sell. You have to serve it to these kind of people. You have to do this. You have to do that. I want to make those decisions on my own. I don't want to give the government the precedence or the credence, if you will, to feel that it's okay for them to just throw their weight around like that. And so, yes, I do have a vested interest in seeing to it that the government stays small. So here's Ted Cruz. Why do people believe that Ted Cruz is a conservative? It's not because he's done anything conservative. If you look at his track record, he hasn't actually done anything that's especially conservative. People believe that he's a conservative because he says he is. He's always bragging about how he's the most conservative senator in the Senate, how he's conservative this, conservative that. So it's basically just the words that are coming out of his mouth. And so Republicans like to accuse Democrats of not doing their research, of being dumb, this, that, and the third, of being so susceptible to propaganda. But Republicans are just as susceptible to propaganda insofar that
Ted
they
Cruz
fall for.
He was grandstanding when they had the Twitter situation during the election. He was up there. You think you have the right to do this? You think you have the? I'm like, you ain't gonna do nothing.
Right.
You just. I knew that guy. What's his name? Dempsey. He was just sitting there like, yeah. And the way he answered was so unbothered. He was fearless. He knew you can't stop me. There's nothing I can do because the Republicans are in on it. Your job is to act like you care. But you were at the meeting last week.
Exactly.
With all the Republicans, you knew we were going to gang up on Trump, and you weren't going to do anything about it. So now you're going to grandstand. I'm gonna just sit here and be fearless because I know you can't touch me.
Right.
And that's 100%.
What he did. And not only that, whenever he was grandstanding with the AM radio in every vehicle act, he was saying, and not only that, get this, he was saying, the only person who's against this bill is Rand Paul, and he's in the wrong because we are coming together in a bipartisan way to push this bill. And so he's kind of bragging about the bipartisanship of the bill, when the reality is, more often than not, whenever a politician is saying that something is bipartisan, that means detrimental to the American people at large.
I'm gonna say this. I think talk radio was instrumental in my life. I mean, I was a big Rush Limbaugh guy.
It is. But you give the government you vest the power in the government to force a car manufacturer to put AM radio. Like, you as a consumer, if you depend on AM radio, like, no,
I agree with you. I was just go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, as a consumer, if you enjoy AM radio, and that's a big part of how you gather information, so on and so forth. If you are in the market for a car, simply go to a manufacturer who has AM radio in their car. It's that simple. This impulse that many of us have, I'm not saying it's you, but this impulse that many of us have to utilize the government to force people to do what we want them to do, or to not do something that we like, that to me is a kind of tyranny that I don't think is beneficial to anyone, really. You know what I mean? Let the free market decide. Like, why do we give the government all this power at the end of the day? You know what I'm saying?
Look, I'm a free market guy. To the end. I think if it was me looking at the Great Depression, they should have left it alone. That's my mindset. Like, so I agree with you. I do have to go because I got class in 3 minutes. So yeah, I got to get ready. But I enjoyed it, and we can have a part 2. I love to talk about other issues. I wanna be on that Sunday, but you don't want me on that Sunday, man. You don't want me on that Sunday, man. It's all right. It's okay. It's okay.
No, I'll have you on a Sunday for sure.
Yeah, and Chad. Not Chad. What's his name?
Chuck.
Chuck. That's my boy, man. I love Chuck's content. The way he tore down the Black Panthers was masterful.
Yeah.
Because I have to admit, I did not know they were connected with all this other stuff. I was like, wow. Like he really
Chuck is a genius.
Yeah, straight up. So I love to listen to his content.
I'll definitely have you back on, and I'll be on time next time. Today just kind of got away from me.
Ain't no thing, man. I enjoyed it. I was supposed to get a haircut. I'm looking kind of woolly. But, you got me up here with my face. Y'all ain't going to ever see me again. So this is your last time seeing me. So you ain't going to ever see me no more. We're going to be on StreamYard. Y'all going to see the Tuskegee statue of Booker T. Washington. Because you ain't going to see me no more. So this is it. It's the last time y'all going to see me.
All right. Appreciate it, Sub.
All right, brother. Take care.
All right. So as I was saying, with the whole Ted Cruz thing, there's this act they're trying to push. They're calling it the AM Radio in Every Vehicle Act. And if you are somebody who depends on AM radio, who gets your information from AM radio, that's all fine and dandy. But again, the decision should be yours when you're in the market for a vehicle to find a vehicle or a manufacturer of a vehicle who puts AM radio in their vehicles. It's that simple. Not only that, but you have access to AM radio digitally as well. And so, you can, with Bluetooth connectivity, with aux connectivity, you have ways to listen to AM radio in your vehicle. We live in the 21st century for peep's sake. And so you have Ted Cruz up there, and what is he talking about? He's talking about, well, this is a bipartisan bill. We're coming together left and right because it's this important. This, mind you, this is the same guy who claims that he's a conservative, who claims that he's for small government. But how is utilizing the government to force car manufacturers to put AM radio in their vehicles? How is that small government? How explain that? How is that an exercise of small government? And not only that, he says, well, experts say this and the experts say that. So you're now depending on the expert class when this is the same class who throughout the 20th century have devastated and destroyed American society. This is what they've done. The so-called expert class. They've done more to damage society than they have to help society. Yet Ted Cruz is citing them as reasons as to why Congress should pass his bill. And then he goes, and then, Rand Paul takes the stage and he's talking about this act is government expansion. It's government run amok. And he's absolutely right in saying that. And so I'm finding that people like Rand Paul are the most consistent when it comes to staying true to the notion that government should be small. Rand Paul is one of the few people who are doing that. I'm no libertarian. I'm no Republican. I'm just simply acknowledging who is in the right and who is in the wrong. And so again, Ted Cruz, the only reason y'all think he's a conservative is because he told you he is. And so whenever I see things like that, it lets me know that so-called Republicans are just as susceptible to propaganda as the left. If it takes nothing more than the left to say a thing to make you think that they are really that thing, and you call that propaganda, Ted Cruz is doing the same thing. He told you he's a conservative. He hasn't demonstrated his conservative bona fides. He haven't demonstrated it. He's just telling you that he is. And you fall for it. Same thing with Dan Crenshaw. Same thing. Name any Republican politician who's bragging about their conservative. Like, show me. Don't just tell me. Show me. Show me in the way that you are putting bills on the table to repeal legislative acts over the course of the last 100 years that has so socialized and Sovietized our country. Are you repealing? Are you putting up bills to repeal these acts? Are you saying things like we should sunset and get rid of the education department in the federal government? Are you proposing such things as that? Are you proposing to crack down on the bureaucratic state that has so devastated our country? Are you doing things like that? Because if you aren't, then shut up. You're not a conservative. You're not a small government guy. You don't believe in the Constitution. I mean, I don't know how else to explain it. But again, this is yet another reason as to why I don't go around calling myself a Republican. Because Republicans are just as weak. They are just as crooked. They are just as corrupt. They are just as, they're the same as the Democrats. And again, I disagree with Sub when he says that, well, you have Democrats who are going all in on communism, and you have Republicans who are trying to fight back, but they're going a lot slower. I don't think that's the case. I think really the Republican Party in its current state exists merely to placate those of us who are conservatives, to make us think that, okay, at least we have somebody fighting for us. So they're meant to just simmer down, tamp down. We got this. they're trying to, in my opinion, dissuade those of us who will get together in the private sector to demand an overhaul in our government, an overhaul in the way that things are going, an overhaul in the way that things are run. That's their purpose, and they serve it quite well. When you look at what happened on January 6th, what led up to January 6th? What led up to it? The thing that led up to it is the fact that we all were watching the 2020 election results as they were rolling in. We all saw what happened. And it seems like clockwork. All of the major news organizations, Fox News, CNN, PBS, ABC, NBC, all of them at the same time seem to have called the election for Joe Biden. And we were kind of weirded out about that because there were just some things that were at play that were just kind of that were funny, things that just they didn't seem to square with reality. And immediately there were messages coming in of voter fraud and irregularities, not only in one state but in multiple states. There's there's irregular things that are happening, and these things need to be investigated. And to the extent that people try to investigate them, you have courts that were throwing out these cases, that were pretending like there was nothing to see here. And you couldn't even ask questions in the press. The press, everybody in the press seemed to be in one accord in saying that Trump lost, Biden won fair and square. You can even question it. And so at every front between the November election and January, there were multiple attempts to, at the very least, investigate what was going on. Even the investigations were denied. And those who tried to pretend like they were investigating it seemed like there wasn't any fire behind what they were doing. And so people were getting more and more dissatisfied and frustrated with what was going on. And so all that bubbled up into what we call January 6th. People were frustrated that our government and the powers that be and the press were pretending like nothing ever happened, that the election was fair and square, when all we were calling for was a robust investigation. The judges were in on it. The media was in on it. The government, everybody was in on it. I would argue that even some in Trump's administration were in on it. And so this is what happened, and that's what led up to January 6th. And so what did the Republican Party do? They distanced themselves from Trump. They distanced themselves from, Republican voters and people who call themselves Republicans, and they kind of showed their true establishment colors, and the rest is history. And so for me, when I see all this go on, it makes it very clear to me that the Republicans they're not just interested in slow playing the inevitable Sovietization of America. They are meant to, once again, placate and pander to those of us who are conservatives, patting us on the head. Yeah, we're for family values. Yeah, we're against abortion. Yeah, we're, So they tell you all the things that they want to hear, when at the end of the day, they are in cahoots with the uniparty globalization of America. They're in cahoots with it. And they are doing the same things that the left is doing in terms of spending, in terms of expanding their power, in terms of overtaxing, in terms of everything else that the left does. Everything that they accuse the left of doing, they're doing the exact same thing. The problem is that not enough of us are paying enough attention to where it actually matters. And so we love being lied to. We love being placated. We love being pandered to. We love watching these useless debates where people talk over each other and nothing substantive ever gets talked about. They never talk about the existence, once again, of all this legislation, of all these laws that are socialist-esque, and how we should begin the work of repealing these laws to get back to the true edicts of the Constitution. No Republican ever talks about that. If you are a Republican politician and you're only talking about family values and abortion, this and the other, things that I agree with, don't get me wrong, but you're only talking about those things. You're never talking about look, America at this point in the 21st century is unrecognizable. We are a far cry from the country built by our forefathers, our founding fathers. We are a far cry from that. The government has run amok. The Fed has run amok. We are just, once again, unrecognizable at this point. How do we begin the work as a party, as the GOP, of rolling back this runaway train and getting back to that, getting back to the Constitution? Far too few of us as so-called Republicans are talking about such a thing. This is why I appreciate people like Rand Paul. This is why I appreciate the late Justice Antonin Scalia. But I can count literally on one hand. This is why I appreciated people like Barry Goldwater. I can count on one, maybe two hands, those who were in elected office, those who were in high office, who were actually interested in getting back to the Constitution. For the most part, what you find is most of these politicians are part of the uniparty. They're part of a globalist agenda. This is also true of Nikki Haley. Vivek Ramaswamy, who I dislike for my own reasons, but he rightly pointed out in the last debate that Nikki Haley sounds just like the so-called left when she's talking about only a woman can do this. You don't like women, women. She's playing into identity politics because she thinks that this is going to help her win the election. Now, she wouldn't do that if she didn't know what I know, namely that the Republican Party is just as susceptible to identity politics, just as susceptible to the let me in because I'm a woman or let me in because I'm black, or whatever the case may be. She understands that the Republican Party is just as susceptible to that as the left. So-called Republicans like to bash Democrats or bash leftists because you're only interested in diversity and what your party looks like than you are in the substantive issues. You like to bash the left for that when you turn around and do the same exact thing. Yes, I'm heavily melanated. Yes, I have conservative values, but if you're interested in having me come to your event because I'm the black Republican, I'm not interested in coming to your event at all. Either you're interested in my ideas, you're interested in what I have to say based upon the merit of what I'm saying, or you're not. I'm not going to come in and be your token black guy because you want to show, look, we as Republicans, we have blacks too. We have gays too. We have women too. Unfortunately, I mean, you look at, for example, the rapper YG or the rapper Sexy Red. Just within the past 3 months, both of them went on podcasts and they say, yeah, we are interested in Trump because he gave out money. Joe Biden's not giving out money. We like Trump now. We're going to vote for Trump. You see Cardi B, who's criticizing Biden for God knows what. And so you have three black folks who are prominent in the entertainment industry. What does Republicans do? Yeah, we like YG now. Yeah, we like Sexy Red now, although her music is demonic. Yeah, we like Cardi B, although she's a poor influence on women and girls. We like them now because they're saying things that we like. Here's our black woman, Cardi B, who is representative of what we all know to be true now. Like, what's going on? Like, have you lost your everlasting mind? Like, have you lost your senses? What happened to principles? What happened to honor? What happened to being true to what you say or what you claim to believe? I'm no Rand Paul apologist, but at least I can acknowledge the fact that he said that he's a small government guy. And when you look at his willingness to stick his neck out and be the oddball out, be the guy, the lone guy who's voting against this bill that's so-called bipartisan on the basis that the result of it will be the expansion of the government. I say, okay, here's a man who actually practices what he preach. So I can appreciate that. I'm going to give honor to whom honor is due. So again, I have a lot of criticism, as you can see, of the Republican Party and their participation in globalism. Wanted to get to some of these super chats. Let's see. Looks like we got one from from Riley Walker. See if this comes up. Super chat with no comment. Really appreciate it. We got one from Sir Tice. He says, "Salute gents, and wait to hear a discussion between two well-informed gents discussing and issuing ideas. Civilly, respect, and looking forward to this conversation." Thank you. Sorry it didn't go as long as I wanted it to, but next time it will be more in depth and robust. So, and then I wanted to get to this comment from Stimulated Students. He says, "If you lost a business as a result of government sanctioned terrorism, like the summer of 2020, the government should repay." I agree with that. If the government took something from you, from your business, I do believe that you should be compensated from that, like from your business. However, if we're talking about something that happened 75, 100 years ago to people who are no longer around, and you're trying to benefit off of that I disagree with. Because again, it opens up this kind of Pandora's box. It opens up this kind of can of worms where now you'll have people coming out of the woodworks and say, well, my ancestors too were negatively impacted by this decision or this government or that government or these people or those people. Because again, we all have a grievance at the end of the day. Are we going to now get in the circle and sing Kumbaya and talk about our grievances and how we're owed this, that, or the other? As a Christian, and as somebody who has common sense, I don't think that that's helpful or counterproductive, because what it does is it lays the groundwork and it lays a kind of precedence, if you will, for a government that is set up as a fixture in our lives to bring about equity. And that is a making, my friends, of a socialist and communist society. I do not wish to give the government the kind of in, if you will, give them the inch that they can then take the mile in the expansion of a communist state. And so for that reason, I'd rather say, look, what's done is done. What's in the past is in the past. Let's, again, roll back the runaway train that is government and try to get closer and closer to the Constitution. And in so doing, get closer and closer to a meritocracy. So at that, let's see if we have any more comments that came in. Folks, I'll be back probably tomorrow, but if you don't see me tomorrow, then I'll be coming up here on Sunday evening at the same time as Cutting Through the Culture. It'll be myself along with Dear Woke Christian, otherwise known as Jason Whitaker, as well as Kevin Briggins of Offcode, and then Talib Smith. He'll also be with us. So it'll be the four of us. I call these guys the Negro Spirituals. So I'll be together with the Negro Spirituals, and we'll be discussing some important issues. Cutting Through the Culture will be back on the air in January of next year. I think January 7th to be exact. So at that, thank you all for watching. I love you all, and God bless.